integrity and ethics, drive for results, intellectual capacity, and adaptability. So when we hire PUPians, they have this kind of competencies.
Of course, they're very intelligent people, responsible in a sense because whenever we meet these graduates and we ask them what are their future plans, they would always come up with answers like helping out their family, or because I'm done with school, I'll help out another sibling. So you would know already that these kids, even before they actually embark on certain work, they already have goals in mind.
They're not maarte, no? Whatever you give them, they know that if it's for the purpose of the job, they will do it. And so they have, they're the ones that survive the challenges of work. They don't shirk away from responsibility. They're the type who, whatever the job requires, they're up for the challenge.
PUPians enable people everywhere to grow and thrive.
PUP is one of the pillars of the nation because it is an institution that provides good graduates, people who really contribute to the success of the community or to the success of the country.
To all the people associated with PUP, if you're a graduate, congratulations, and you should be proud of yourselves. For those of you that are students, please continue the tradition, the proud legacy that your school has. Some of you, PUP, you work for us now. We appreciate you. We know you're good employees. For those of you that might work for us in the future, please consider us. We'd love to have you. We know that you make a great employee for Emerson.
PUPians, bring everything you are. If you have big ideas, let's talk. Come work where passion meets possibility. You can visit jobs.del.com for opportunities.
To pursue your dreams and work hard for whatever endeavor you will choose. And in the event that you will choose to apply in one of the fastest BPO companies in the Philippines, I would like to invite you to apply in EGS, an Alorica company, because our doors are open for all of you.
To all the PUPians, let's create a Science of Smile together.
Smart is very happy to have PUP graduates now enjoying their career and let them live more.
Hashtag Sites to PUP. We will support you in more ways than one.
Tara na, maging magkasama na tayo. Mabuhay ang PUP!
Noon pa man, malaki na ang naging bahagi ng mga kababaihan sa lipunang Pilipino. Kaisa sila sa marubdob na paghahangad ng kalayaan ng ating lahi. Kabilang sila sa paglinang ng ating makulay na sining at mayamang kultura. Kasapi sila sa pagtataguyod ng mga adhikain ng kapwa mamamayan at sa pagtugon sa mga pangangailangan ng lipunan. Katuwang sila sa sa pagtuklas sa mga larangan ng agham at medisina. Kapanalig sila sa pagpapairal ng batas, karapatan at katarungan para sa lahat. Kabahagi sila sa paglilingkod sa bayan at sa pagpapanatili ng demokrasyang Pilipino. Sa paglipas ng panahon, hindi nagmaliw ang kanilang pag-ibig sa ating inang bayan. Mga kababayan, ito ang alay ng mga kababaihang Pilipino para sa bayan. Tumayo po tayong lahat at sabay-sabay nating awitin ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
Ayaw magiliw, pero sa silanganan, alam ng puso, sa bibig mo'y buhay. Lupang hiniram, gulat ka ng pag-ibig, sa manlulubi, di ka masisingil, sa lahat ng tulog, sa sigat at sa lalim mong babang, may ginatang tula at awit sa paglayang minamahal. Ang isang ng patawad mo'y talumpay na nagmilingin, ang ituwing na araw na kailan pa may madilim. Lupa ng araw ng 100% buhay ay langit sa piling mo. Ang higaya ng pagpay makahamit, ang mga tay ng dahil sa'yo.
All right, good morning everyone. Magandang umaga po. I'm your host for today's webinar, Jope Solosa from the Alumni Relations and Career Development Office. Yan. So, ang ating pong universidad sa mga ganitong panahon po, no? 120th founding anniversary of the Polytechnic University of the Philippines. We are now in audible na po. Okay. So, isang magandang umaga po sa ating lahat. Ngayon po, sa umagang ito, magiging kasama nyo kaming muli para maibigay sa inyo ang isang, alam nyo po yung pagbabalik tanaw po ito eh. Hindi po ito isang webinar lang po. The value of this activity is that we are able to bring back to the university, kaya po balik sinta, the alumni. Na may mga alumni po, graduate na po sila, but they are still willing to serve, they are still willing to participate, and that service is to pay it forward. The power of multiplication, biblically, speaking. Yes, naririto po sila through webinar, online, kahit po napaka-busy po ng ating mga professionals na invited. Our alumni are really they want to bring something para po sa ating community. Kaya po, today, we will witness another professional. One of the notable alumni that should be recognized, I may say so, right? From the College of Public Administration, CPSPA. He is going to share with us his expertise on public policy. Okay. So bago po tayo magpatuloy, can we hear now the welcoming message of our university's president, please? Technical, can you assist us? Thank you.
A pleasant day to everyone, to our university executive officials, VP Tom Testor, deans and directors, department heads, AVP Floro Quindo, OJT coordinators, fellow faculty members, and to all our guest speakers, and most importantly, to our beloved students. Welcome and thank you for attending the Balik Sintang Paralan activity. Thank you to ARCDO for organizing and hosting this event, which provides a great opportunity for the university to continue to engage with our alumni. Our alumni, as stakeholders, will always play a critical role in fostering a culture of excellence at our university. Their voices are very important and significant in pointing us in the right direction, being key contributors to their respective industries. And we recognize their roles as our university's ambassadors. I believe that our alumni are always eager to give back to their alma mater, and this webinar series provides an excellent opportunity for them to do so. Thank you to all of our alumni guest speakers for taking the time to mentor your fellow scholar ng bayan. Your many stories of tribulations and triumphs will undoubtedly inspire our students who want to follow in your footsteps and use education to achieve success. Your presence here today sends a message of hope to all PUPians that despite many limitations, it is possible to rise and that success is within reach with hard work, determination, discipline, and drive. To all of our student participants, may you be inspired and learn from our guest speakers who have already walked the path you're about to take. Listen to the valuable lessons they are about to share, ask questions, and take advantage of this opportunity to gain an understanding of the topics they will be discussing. Always remember that the first step toward achieving one's goals is to learn from others, followed by the courage to apply what you have learned in your own life. The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. Eleanor Roosevelt once said, kaya huwag kayong matakot mangarap sapagkat kung mayroon kayong courage at saka determination and you keep on trying, I am sure na makakamit ninyo ang mga magagandang pangarap. Kagaya ng ating mga matatagumpay na alumni na magbabahagi ng kanilang mga karanasan bilang scholar ng bayan. May you, like our successful alumni, finally find the path you want to take and believe that you can be the best at it. And may you never forget the words of our PUP hymn, gagamitin ang karunungan mula sa iyo para sa bayan. Maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat. Mabuhay ang Sintang Paralan at pagpalain po tayo ng Panginoong May Kapal.
Yan. Maraming salamat po sa recorded video message ng ating mahal na presidente, Dr. Manuel M. Mo. So now, I would like to introduce to everyone. By the way, before I start, I would like to remind everyone po, who are participant, especially our resource speaker, that we are now live in the Facebook PUP alumni page. So we are now available live streaming. So if ever sa ating po mga alumni, they are very occupied at their work, you are invited to watch. This is available anytime at your own convenience. Please, we are inviting you to continuously support us and participate here in our Balik Sinta webinar programs. So, continuing, it is my pleasure to introduce to you our notable alumni as the resource speaker for today. She is a Doctor of Public Administration from the Pamantasan ng Lungsod ng Maynila. Previous years, he was able to attain the Masters in Public Administration in the University of the Philippines. Also, Bachelors of Law. Some earned units in Colegio San Sebastian, Recoletos. And of course, our very own Polytechnic University of the Philippines. He graduated from
Internet connection.
CPSPA under the Bachelor of Arts in Political Science, major in Public Administration. He has 20 years of experience in his teaching profession. He's a professor in Political Science and Public Administration, a special lecturer in Public Administration also in graduate school. He became a dean of the Office of Student and Development Services, director for Center for University Extension and Services, and also a director in the University Research Center in the Pamantasan ng Lungsod ng Maynila. Of course, for 23 years. Saan pa ako pupunta? Kung hindi, I have to grow with the university. But of course, it's not only for the internet. Also, he was once a special lecturer at the San Beda University and in Mendiola, Manila. Everyone, I would like to present to you our friend, Brad, Dr. Carmelo Rico Bihasa. Good morning, sir.
Hello po, good morning.
Where
Ma'am
are you
Jopi, good
now?
morning. Good morning po.
Right.
Good morning. Oh, kinabahan naman po ako doon sa introduction na yon.
Magandang umaga, sir. Sir Melo, how are
Magandang
you?
umaga po.
Welcome back to PUP kahit online.
Opo. Nakakatuwa po at medyo na kinikilabutan ako. Kinikilabutan po ako. First time to be invited to talk with PUP people. Nakakatuwa po. Magandang umaga po. All right. Sige po. Again, good morning. Thank you very much, Ma'am Jopi, for a very generous introduction. As I've said, I am elated and at the same time, goosebumps. So that's what I'm feeling right now. It's really different to be, talking before an audience with PUP people who are with me this morning. I've seen also the greetings from the University President, Engineer Manuel Muhi, who happened to be a a colleague back then at the PUP-OU, sometime in the late 90s po. Okay? So, Ma'am Jopi, start na po ba ako? I mean, with my discussion po, lecture.
All right, sir. We can do it now.
All right, thank you very much po. Allow me to share my PowerPoint po. So, we can start with it. There you are. Nakikita na po ba yung aking presentation po?
Yes, sir. Nakikita na po.
All right. Again, thank you so much. And this is just what? Parang it's a one morning or one afternoon. Ma'am Jopi sent me a message and asking me if I could, deliver this kind of lecture or talk before PUP people. Okay, and then realizing that PUP is where I came from, and PUP is where I learned everything, and where I owe practically what I have right now, I definitely said yes. So how can I say no to somebody who's the wife of a very important person to me? Actually, before going here, I happened to have, have a short talk with my Brad, no? Professor Perry, David Lazaro Solosa. We had some exchanges, and then we were talking about so many things, no, other than this one, no. Pero again, no, good morning and thank you very much. So, what I will be discussing with you today is something about my major, my first lab, no, when it comes to public administration. So, this is all about public policy. I was thinking about globalization, pero I said, sabi ko, I will do more of justice, no, to my university if I will be discussing something about this public policy. And so I ended up with this kind of presentation. Now, allow me to share with you some sort of a history about this public policy. This public policy was actually a field that evolved, no, sometime after the Second World War. And this was more of a tool that was started and developed by Harold Laswell. And it was his contribution to the field of public administration and to the government of the United States of America. However, it did not stop there, and then eventually was shared to several other countries and to several other disciplines, right? And fast track to the current time, we have it also in our country. And this is, I think, very important considering that a lot of those people in the government are actually learning something about public policy, and they're also using this as a tool in terms of understanding the problems that they are confronting right now, and also in the process of resolving them, they're also using this as a tool, right? So let me start with the definition of this concept. I hope you're still seeing my PowerPoint. Okay pa rin po ba? Nakikita niyo po? All right, so again, no, I have here two definitions of what the public policy is, right? This is something that is a concept, no, that is defined by no less than known scholars, no, like, for example, James Anderson and even Thomas Berglund. So with this definition by James Anderson, he actually made mention of public policy as basically a stable, purposive course of action or inaction followed by an actor or set of actors in dealing with a problem or matter of concern. So in this definition, Anderson was glued to the fact that, according to him, in this definition, the government is actually conscious that it is doing something. So it is a purposive course of action, which means that the government itself is conscious that it is actually pursuing something in order to resolve a particular policy issue or a policy problem. Okay. Now, more than that, more than being a purposive course of action, James Anderson made mention about the government doing in the same manner what we call inaction. So if you happen to see the government not doing something at all in terms of resolving a particular issue or a policy problem, still the government is pursuing something in the sense that probably the government deems it important not to proceed with an immediate action simply because it will be somehow appropriate not to do something at all to a particular problem because the other factors are not yet right for it to resolve or to come up with a certain what do you call this policy or another policy. So at times, as I've said, though, you'll see the government doing an inaction. Now, in the same manner, it also tells, the definition also tells that the action of the government are participated by several stakeholders. Now, when I say stakeholders, these are actually the actors, which may be official or unofficial. Meaning to say, official actors are the ones who are part of the government, say, for example, the executive, which are part of the government, say, for example, the executive department and the legislative department and the other participants, which may necessarily be part of the government. Now, on the other hand, there are also the unofficial, meaning to say there are those that institutions or people who participate in the process of creating a policy. Sabi nga nila, we have the civil society and we have the other participants, as I've said. They may be people and they may be institutions as well. Now, in the same manner, what is important with this definition is that James Anderson is addressing this, addressing something in terms of crafting a policy. And take note that in the process of creating a policy, it is always addressed to a particular policy issue or a policy problem. All right. So with this, that somehow completes the idea on what James Anderson is saying about public policy. Now, such definition in this context advances the idea that public policy should not be limited into something that is being proposed or is intended to, meaning to say it is not just pursuing one's objective, it is not just pursuing what we call the resolution of a policy issue, but basically it is a purposive course of action. That is what is more important, the way I see it, in terms of pursuing a policy, that you have to be conscious that the government is actually doing something, and in the process of doing something, there are several stages that the government are passing through. So much so that James Anderson would often say that public policy is always a product of the 5 stages of policy-making process. You have to start with the identification of the problem, analyze it, and then you proceed with the converting that policy issue or policy problem to become the agenda of the government. Then it will be followed by the policy formulation, and then eventually the adoption, which is basically the decision-making process that we do. If we're talking about the national policy making or even the local policy making or the administrative policy making that I actually included in the book that I wrote, that I published sometime in 2017, Understanding Public Policy, Theories, Concepts, and Applications. Now, in the same manner, there is also what we call the policy implementation. To me, whenever I discuss public policy with my students, I always say that that stage, the policy implementation, is the most challenging part and the most exciting, as I always say. When I say exciting, it is exciting in the sense that this is the period or the stage when we would know, okay, if those policymakers were able to really come up with a better policy. Kasi you'll know more or less if the policy is good or bad, if it is producing what we call the benefits that are supposed to redound to the general public. Now, in the same manner, at the end of it, there has to be what we call the policy evaluation. Now, people would say that the policy evaluation is just, a process that is just a piece of cake or a walk in the park. No, it's not that. Actually, it is the most difficult. No? You have to come up with some sort of means by which you would be able to say whether the policy has been implemented properly or not, right? So there are things that you need to do there. Now, it's not an easy process. So you will have to take note of the policy outputs. You will have to take note of the policy outcome as well as the policy impact. I hope you guys are, understanding what I'm saying, simply because those things are a bit technical in the sense that you really have to take up the subject or this course to be able to understand the public policy. But in as much as I would want to make it light, I hope I'm doing it. I'm doing justice to this webinar by telling you something about public policy. And siguro this is just also an opportunity for me to suggest that, again, Sintang Paaralan should take note of the importance of public policy. Kasi my college has been operating for a while, has been existing for a while. Back then it was CEFP, College of Economics, Finance, and Politics. We've had already public administration during that time. And I hope to see somehow with my good friend, Dean Elmer, somehow sana to see what we call a master in public policy or some sort of a specialist field for this public policy. Anyway, just to continue, the other definition is this is actually the definition that I normally use. The other one is the definition by Thomas Birkeland. Thomas Birkeland said that you can understand public policy by looking at the different attributes. Okay, so the first one is that policy is made in the response to a problem that requires the prompt attention of the government. So it is like the definition of James Anderson, because the first attribute that Thomas Birkeland said is that it is always addressed to a particular policy issue or policy problem. Of course, it is always given. Now, policies made on behalf of the general public, the reason why there is a policy is for the policy to be implemented and to benefit the general public. Ergo, it is always made on behalf of the general public. Now, policy is geared towards a desired state, that is the resolution of the problem. Policy is ultimately made by the government, as there is no other institution which has the power to monopolize the creation of what we call the policy, the sinasabi natin. But it is, of course, granted by the Constitution. It is given by the Constitution that it should always be the government which should have the monopoly of creating what we call these policies. Now, policies ultimately made by policies interpreted and implemented by the concerned actors and by the concerned actors. So that means to say that on top of those official policymakers, there are the unofficial policymakers. Once you get into the implementation stage, okay, those official and unofficial policymakers would always interpret, come up with some sort of evaluation or probably its opinion about certain policies that are implemented. And in the process, we'll have to somehow participate also in the process of implementing it, whether it's direct or indirect process. And then the last attribute is that, according to Thomas Birkeland, public policies whatever the government chooses to do or not to do. Okay, when I discuss the other subject, which is introduction to public administration, I always take note of the two distinct functions of the government. One is in politics, and then the other one is administration. Now, when we say politics, we often associate it as the process of policy making. And when we say administration, we refer to that as basically the extension of the policy, which means that it is the process of implementing the policy. Okay, so I remember when we were reading that article, The Study of Administration, it was an article which I cannot forget. No, it was authored by Woodrow Wilson, the time that the period when we started to really appreciate the science of administration or public administration. By the way, that article was required to us by Dr. Antonio Sumali, isa sa mga nagpahirap po sa amin back then when we were still in the students of the CEFP. And if my professor is here, magandang umaga po, Dr. Umali. Pasensya na po na banggit kita rito at naidamay po kita dito sa presentasyon na ito. Anyway, so yung sinasabi po natin na artikulo po na yun, it was definitely a very good article as we somehow understood what we call the public administration as a discipline. And of course, it introduced what we call some concepts about public policy. The fact that there is what we call the word administration, and that the concept of administration really telling us that it is what happens after a policy is made, and therefore it has to be implemented. All right? So those are the two definitions of public policy. Now, moving on, we have the next slide, which says something about, or which asks something about, why do we need to study public policy? So there are several reasons, but James Anderson actually made three, or suggested three importance or three reasons on why we need to study public policy. One reason is actually for scientific reasons, which tells us something about the curiosity that everybody probably would feel, okay, when he or she sees a certain policy issue. So that is why the second sentence says something about that. The study of public policy is important in order to understand the causes and consequences of societal problems. So your curiosity will drive you probably to really dig and understand what may be the causes and consequences of a certain societal problem. So realizing that that is exactly what caused this problem, then again, you might probably be interested to really look into the consequences of that particular problem. And so in the process, you will realize that there is a need for a certain policy, and that for the government to really enact a policy so that it can probably be resolved in the process. Now, in the same manner, public policy or studying public policy is important for professional reasons. So in this context, in this slide, sinabi po natin dyan, it is also important to study public policy as some individuals intend to make the discipline as a field of their specialization. And that is exactly what I'm doing right now. Ma'am Jopi, in advance, I'd like to tell to our audience that wala naman po talagang pera po sa pagtuturo. Ito po ay devotion po ito. At marami naman po kami, sa mga, of course, sa PUP, marami din po sa ibang universidad. Pero kung kayo po ay naghahangad na yumaman, huwag po kayong pumunta sa teaching. Pero yung satisfaction po that you can derive out of what we are doing, yun po yung amazing doon. Yun po yung sinasabi nating contentment that we find. All right? So in this context, for professional reasons, tell us that, again, we need to study public policy simply because we might use this in the process. I am teaching public policy, and therefore my knowledge about public policy, which I learned, not just in an overnight fashion, but definitely since the time when I studied public administration until now, I'm still learning about public policy. So andun po, And then of course, other than teaching, where we have some sort of, not necessarily consultancy, but some advices that we give to some people, no? I remember when I was with my colleague also, si Dr. Alex Gonzalez. Ma'am Jopi, pasensya na ha, may nadadamay po mga tao dito ha. Marami po kami mga exchanges. Kasama na po dito si si Maestro, si Dean Elmer. Ito po ay mga operators po nung sinasabi natin ng mga, hindi po operators po ng Pogo, hindi po yan, no? When I say, it's more of a hyperbole, no? When I say operators, no? Sila po ay mga nakukonsulta ng mga, tawag dito, ng mga, siguro, in the past, sa mga politicians, no? To navigate on how probably they can win yung mga elections sa kung saan sila po ay napupunta. Hindi ko lang po masabi, ma-explain ng todo kasi nga po baka magalit sa akin itong mga kaibigan ko na to. But definitely for professional reasons, kasama po yung mga yan. Okay? Mga eksperto po yung mga sinasabi ko mga tao na yan. Kasama na rin po si Ma'am Jopi. Okay? All right, so going back to what I'm saying, no? The third one is that for political reasons. The idea here is that if you have a knowledge in public policy, then again, if you happen to have run for a particular position and that in the process you win the position, no, then again, it will be easier for you to craft better policies. The problem, according to some scholars, no, the problem with some politicians, no, is that they normally hire, okay, yung sinasabi natin mga, what do you call this, consultants or even mga technocrats, so that they would be able to get the necessary advice for them to be able to come up with a better policy that they will implement in the they will implement in the process. Pero if they themselves have the knowledge, over or about this public policy, then they would be able to really come up with better policies. All right. So there are several other importance or reasons on why we need to study public policy, but I guess I just would limit my discussion to the three. Otherwise, we won't be able to finish this webinar. Anyway, moving on. So there are several categories of public policy. I think I included here 6 categories of public policy. All right. So the foremost, though, among these categories is always the constituent policy. When we say constituent policy, I refer to that as a state building. So it is concerned with the establishment of the structure of the government. So it is a type, a policy that is nonetheless concerned with state building. Now, policies that create particular government agencies, policies that somehow dictate on how government should be operating, on how a policy certainly would be implemented. These are common examples of this constituent policy. Yung mga implementing rules and regulations, all right? Yung mga charters na sinasabi po natin are examples of this constituent policy. Now, the other one, which is, I think, the ones that we often see, is the distributive policy. This involves the allocation of services or benefits to particular segments of the population. It involves the allocation of, it involves those services that are normally seen by the general public. For example, the education services, yung mga public works, they involve the funds, resources of the government, but they are being turned into services that we normally see. All right. Now, as opposed to distributive policy, I'll turn to the next slide po muna, just so we can have a continuity between this distributive and redistributive. So as opposed to distributive, we have this redistributive policy. Now, what is this? The difference lies in the fact that when we speak of redistributive policy, we refer directly to the wealth and resources of the government that are directly given to the general public. So an example of this redistributive policy is what we call the 4Ps, for example. Isa po sa mga common po yan, yung conditional cash transfer na sinasabi natin, or yung pantawid pamilya, hindi ko naman spell out yung sumunod na P. All right, so we are directly, the government, not us, the government is directly giving what they call yung money to the general public. And of course, yung sinasabi natin mga yung sa Senior Citizens Act, yung sinasabi natin benefits that are being given to them, not yung discounts but I think meron po tayong sinasabi nating mga dole out ba or something else. There is a component to sinasabi natin senior citizen, Pero if not, definitely it's a bit different. Pero when we say redistributive, we refer to exactly the resources, money of the government, or even yung sinasabi nating mga wealth niya. All right? So going back to the other slide. Now, the other one is regulatory policy. This is also a common policy that we see because many of the policies that we see are related to this regulatory policy, especially to those business organizations or business corporations that are operating and which are being required by the government to come up with some business permits. So the fact that they are being required, to have or to secure yung business permits, it's definitely policy. So nagkakaroon ng sinasabi nating regulation. Okay? So that kind of regulation, we can say, is an example of this regulatory policy. So it reduces the freedom or discretion to act of those regulated, whether bankers, utility companies, or meat packers, even those small businesses. For example, every time that we will open yung sinasabi nating school year, especially dito po sa Manila, the city government of Manila will go around together with a lot of inspectors to check restaurants probably, or boarding houses, or some other business what we call this facilities, because they wanted to know whether or not they are complying. So there are certainly policies that are related to that, and they are what we call regulatory policies. All right. Now also we have self-regulatory, and that is of course it's related to regulatory policy. Self-regulatory policy is very similar to, as I've said, regulatory policy, in that they both limit the behavior of some segments of the society. It is the result of the initiative of some groups in the society to regulate the behavior of their members. So examples of this would be those nurses, that ask the government to regulate yung kanilang practices, doctors, lawyers. In fact, sa mga lawyers natin, you cannot practice yung law unless, of course, you're a member of the Judicial and Bar Council. Tama ba ako, Ma'am Joppy? Parang gano'n, no? And then, of course, yung iba ring mga physical therapists natin, really, mga architects natin, that they're basically regulated, self-regulated by the government. And then there are other categories according to James Anderson, but these are not as popular as the other classification. So there are those that are material and symbolic policies, collective goods or private good policies. So yung material, they are basically what we're seeing, what we call yung benefits that are tangible and being given to the general public. Sa symbolic naman, not so much of those tangible benefits, more on parang symbolic. For example, yung mga PUB drivers natin, they're being asked to wear yung sinasabi natin mga uniforms, so that for uniformity or whatever reason there is, but definitely it is an example of this symbolic policy. Sa collective goods naman, of course, kasama na din po dyan sa distributive, para mga distributive policies din po yan, benefits that are being given to the general public. Sa mga private goods, selected beneficiaries lang po ito. Like for example, yung mga medical care, or yung sinasabi nating housing policies, that are basically benefiting only a limited few, of our public. Now, leaving this, we go to the next, which is emerging context of public policy. Now, when we say emerging context, we just refer to the different areas where we commonly see yung ating mga policies. So, other than the classification into those items that I discussed a while ago, we also have these emerging contexts. All right. Now, ano ba yung mga emerging contexts na yan? Of course, we have environmental policies. Napaka-popular po natin ng environmental policies na to. So the trend in environmental policies is dominated by the concept of sustainable development. I bet it, PUP, Sintang Paaralan, is also very much into the promotion of sustainable development goals. All right. So it was conceptualized, started sometime in 2015 and will end by 2030. In fact, some other institutions or academic institutions, they even offered what we call courses related to sustainable development goals, especially sa mga public administration courses po. Now, in the same manner, we also have the education policies. So the thrust of most education policies in recent times is geared towards making the citizens more competitive and productive. In the Philippines, the emphasis of the government is to improve the quality of education, aside from producing more graduates every end of the year. Last night, I was actually drafting a speech of a friend, which he would be delivering somewhere in Iloilo. He was actually looking into the state of our education. And I found out after reading several articles, several seminal papers, that what we have right now in terms of our education, there is some sort of education emergency from which the government must respond to. Okay? And this is brought about by the fact that we had what they call yung recent COVID-19 po. And then, of course, there were several other factors that transpired in the past, which are still continuing until today. So what we have now is an education emergency. And that the government is, I think, equipped to readily respond to this. There is some sort of partnership that the government is doing, no less than PUP and the rest of the state universities also are probably engaging some other institutions just so we can respond to this education emergency. All right. So anyway, it's all about education policies. All right. Now, next one is the health policies. Again, this is important, and what we're seeing right now in terms of health policies, ito yung mga sinasabi natin aftermath ng COVID-19 and how we can probably be more ready and be more competent in terms of responding to this kind of emergencies, also health emergencies. And other than that, we are continuously responding as to the access of the general public in terms of health facilities and health services, right? Now, when it comes to welfare policies, to a developing country such as the Philippines, I believe that welfare policies are common, group of policies or context of policies that we see also in our government. So the welfare policies cover a wide range of programs that transcends even the boundaries of other policy areas. So nagkakaroon na sinasabi nating what do you call this? It is always related to some other areas. Thus, I mentioned here about those areas of activities that consist in public assistance, job training, public health, and even unemployment. So these are all some policies or areas that may be related also to sa sinasabi nating welfare policies. And then the last two, we have the economic policies. Okay, now what is this economic policies? Guys, sandali lang po ha, kasi lobat niya tayo aking laptop.
Okay lang.
All right. Okay, so going back into these economic policies, behind the success of every government, there is always what we call those economic policies. And from the previous administration back, also in the other administrations, until this administration, what we're seeing is that almost all administrations or dispensations are glued with economic policies. And one thing's for sure, they're always looking for infrastructure policies that are related to infrastructure projects. And so, yes, as we see them, economic policies in most countries, like us, are dominated by specific policies that touch on sensitive issues like housing, unemployment, poverty, organization, and infrastructure. Other concerns like globalization, trade relations, and monetary policies are also subject of much consideration. And Sintang Paaralan is very much familiar with a lot of policies of the government. We always troop to Menjola just so we can petition the government for those policies that they're continuously ignoring. Okay, back then when we were in the 90s, all right. So with some of my friends, pero tawag dito sina Batoy kung tawagin namin, mga kaibigan din po natin yan nung kapanahonan natin, Jopi. Tawag dito, ilan lamang po sa mga kasama natin in the past. All right, pero hindi na po ngayon. Medyo nagkaedad na po kami. All right, so si Ma'am Jopi na lang po ang hindi nagkakaedad dito, Now, defense policies. So again, medyo may allergy po tayo dito sa defense policies na to, especially when we heard about red tagging na sinasabi natin na may allergy po tayo dyan. Okay, so defense policies include the internal and external aspects of the security of a particular country. Now, the internal security covers a number of threats, such as rebellion and other destabilizing events. External security, on the contrary, covers those policies that include terrorism and border security. Of course, everybody's familiar with it. I will not touch more on this area, but definitely this is one of the contexts where we see more often than not itong mga policies po natin nato. Okay? So, after the emerging context, we go now to the models of public policy. All right? So, when we say models, right? Models are what? They seem to guide us as to how we should understand the sinasabi nating public policy. All right? So, paano ba siya ginawa? How probably policies developing and benefiting the general public, and some sort of understanding the competition or the debate over a certain policy. Somehow these models would be able to tell us about these things. Now, first one is the institutional model. When we say, from the word institution itself, we can say that this model tells us that the government or the policy is actually what? Something that emanates from the government or from the institution, which we call as government. Now, this institution model sees the government as the source of public policies, considered as its rational response to the demands of the general public or of the people related to some perceived problems. So kanina pa natin dinidefine si public policy, and essentially, we see it as basically what? Something that's created by the government. Now, next one is the process model. What about the process model? So more than the institution, syempre pag may institution, may structure. At pag may structure, may tinatawag po tayong process. So the process is actually what is happening within the institution itself. Now, when we say process, ito po yung 5 stages of the policymaking process that I always associate sa institution po. Now, this process model presents public policy as a product of a series of steps or processes that explain how it is done in the government. The series of steps are arranged logically first. So from the problem itself, after analyzing it, and realizing that the problem is really that big, so naturally you will have to respond to it. So the next logical step would be to bring that to the attention of the government. And you will have to move heaven and earth for you to be able to bring that policy issue or problem to the attention of the government. Because certainly there are competing groups. Either they would support or they would do a lot of actions or a lot of moves in order to dispel what they call the process of getting that to become an agenda of the government. Now, more than that, also you have the your policy adoption and the other processes that I mentioned. So really, this can tell us, this process model can tell us that crafting a policy, is not as easy as probably not as easy as probably writing a policy. It takes a lot of time and definitely a lot of courage before you can even come up with a better policy, competing with the rest of those stakeholders, and then dealing with some pressures by the time you implement a certain policy. That's really too much, and definitely as a process, it would really take time. Okay. Now the other one is group theory. Group theory explains public policy as a result of the competition between several groups that try to sway the actions of the government on their favor. So when we say group theory, the presumption here is that when you propose a policy, assuming that it is still a bill, what you will see are several groups that are competing with one another. Some groups would definitely support a certain proposal, and some groups would, not support it. And therefore, it will be a protracted process of supporting and not supporting that particular bill. So whichever group emerges as the most influential, assuming that it is in favor of the policy or bill, then again, it will see to it that that bill will become a policy. So ganun po yun nangyayari normally. All right? So may mga competing groups. And then the elite theory, the presumption here is that, well, first, those who are in the government are the elites, elite ones, and therefore they normally influence the course of creating a policy. And then some other presumptions would say that the elites are the ones who have the information, they have the resources, and therefore they will have the influence, the power, just so they can create a policy that is tailored fit sa kanila po mga interests. So it's one aspect on how we see how a policy is created and influenced by some groups that are around or existing over a certain policy. And then of course, we have rational model. Rational model is also anchored dun sa process or even institutional model. The fact that it follows a certain cycle, a certain path, then again, it would make it rational. For example, you come up with some sort of an analysis of the problem, and then try to weigh those alternatives, evaluate them, etc., etc. Then again, you will have to really come up with a lot of those processes to make it really a rational product, a policy that is created based on what we call the several stages that make it rational. So it thinks of public policy as the result of the best alternative chosen by the government in responding to the problem of the general public. So following those processes, that would make it a rational one. All right. It is not just a hodgepodge process of creating a policy, but certainly a product of several other means before you can come up with an eventual or a better policy. Now, the other one is incremental model. When we say incremental model, this is something that tells us that a certain policy is actually related with the previous policy. In fact, it is anchored. It is based on the previous policy. And what you have done is just basically an incremental change. What you have added are incremental changes lamang. So what I mean with that is that the incremental model is actually telling us that a policy is not a totally created policy. It is based on the previous policies from which we anchor the policy that we are developing. So when we say incremental, konti lamang po yung mga binago natin. So for example, yung 4Ps na sinasabi po lagi natin, no? If I'm not mistaken, that started during the time of President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. It was also adopted by Pinoy with incremental changes, by the way. And then in the process, it was adopted by the previous administration, no? President PDR, no? And then eventually, right now, it is still continuing. Okay, so I don't know what is there with 4Ps, no? The reason why there is a magic, no? About this policy, no? Kidding aside, guys, see 4Ps po kasi, perhaps different administrations, no? Or dispensations are seeing the policy as something that is really benefiting the general public. I am assuming that the word benefit is basically ideal. Over and above, I do not know. You may have some, ideas about it, but I haven't come up with a policy analysis about these 4Ps, which probably I will do in the process, no? So, oo nga naman, bakit nga ba hindi? No? May magic kasi, no? Imagine niyo, no? Ilang administrations or dispensations, no? Are continuing with these 4Ps. It was copied by from Mexico yata or Brazil ba? Parang a Southern American country. And that really worked well doon po sa kanila. And the Philippines saw that. And so that started during the time of your tita, no, si President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. So after the incremental model, we have the public choice model. Okay, so this treats of public policy as the result of several competing interests among the various actors in the policy-making process of the government. What do I mean by this? So those actors, no, that are proposing something para po sa gobyerno, which may be related to politics or which may be related to economics, they pursue the same interests, something that would really promote or advance, no, yung kanila pong interest. So when we say public choice, we always associate that doon sa interest ng general public. And ang presumption po lagi natin, if the general public's interest is being promoted, it is always to benefit, no, the larger people. So kaya po, lagi natin tinitingnan, or those who are in the government and proposing a policy, they would often look on what the public wants. Okay, kasi nga po, because of this public choice model. So what the public wants, we will see to it that we will have to support that. All right? So kaya po tinawag natin na public choice. Okay? Now, the last one is the systems theory. This is more of reflecting the systems approach or systems model that we are actually probably familiar with. You have the input, you have the process, you have the output, you have the feedback, and then of course everything is enveloped, no, by the environment. And the environment is continuously influencing what is happening within that system. So it is also a model of public policy. And the one which I gave an extended explanation in the book that I wrote, no, referring to the models of public policy. So masyado pong gasgas atong system theory model po nato. And everybody's actually rooting for this whenever they would explain what we call the models of public policy. All right? So again, we're done with the models of public policy. And we have these policymakers and their environment. Okay? So this is again related to the systems theory model, but I even include it simply because how we see public policies nowadays, they're often impacted or influenced by the kind of the environment that we have. And take note, guys, that within our country, within the Philippines, okay, this is very much true, no? This might also be attendant in other countries, but as we observe it, as I observe it, no, when it comes to the policymaking process in the government, in our government, I often see that really, okay, the process of policymaking is always influenced by the kind of the environment na nagpiprevail po sa atin. And sad to say that a lot of these institutions are always there to influence the kind of policy that is enacted. Okay, so any discussion of public policy is not complete, no, unless the participation of the different policymakers in the government is mentioned. By the way, Dr. Antonio Sumali is always mentioning whenever he would be saying this, no, instead of saying the incomplete, he often says inchoate, no. Well, of course, it has the same meaning, but definitely I would not forget Dr. Antonio Sumali, no, for always saying the word inchoate. Anyway, so it is not complete, no, without seeing or discussing what they call the policymakers and their environment. Now, actors in the policymaking process, according to Anderson, can either be official or unofficial, as I've said a while ago. Official policymakers are those who are part of the government, and they're always there to influence yung public policy. In the same manner as we have the unofficial policymakers, we will see what we call yung mga member of the civil society and non-governmental organizations trying to influence any policy that would probably be of their interests, something that would affect more or less or create an imbalance in the current state of things, then definitely they would often intervene. More so in the same manner with the other stakeholders or actors. All right? So yan po yung klase ng environment na meron tayo. And hindi po nawawala yung sinasabi nating politicking. Okay? Sabi ni Woodrow Wilson in the past, administration should always be divorced from politics. Okay? But eventually, when the Filipinos adopted what we call the science of administration, which Woodrow Wilson was spreading in the past or suggesting in the past, okay, we said that we cannot take what Wilson was saying, that politics should be separated from the administration. And guys, as we see it right now, ako man, convinced ako that whatever we do, okay, within the context of any administration, within the context of any implementation of a certain policy, there would always be politicking. What more, in the process na nga lang yung sinasabi nating policy making, there is always still yung sinasabi nating politicking. Hindi po mawawala yan. All right? And so, in the discussion of policymakers and their environment, okay, this is a common word that is usually mentioned, yung sinasabi nating politicking or politics within the context of policymaking. All right, so I've been mentioning about the official policymakers and unofficial policymakers. Here they are, guys. So, in passing, I'll just be mentioning that. Executive Department, okay, headed by your president right now. Okay, so first, the chief executive will always have the influence over those government agencies which continuously propose policy and probably create policies, also yung administrative policy making. All right. Now, legislative department, they are the ones who are creating yung policies, and therefore they're part of the so-called official policy makers. Okay. Senate man or House of Representatives man. Judicial department, yes, they're also part of the policy making by virtue of their power of judicial review. When a policy is implemented and somebody else went to the Supreme Court and questioned its constitutionality, the Supreme Court will definitely come up with rule in order to decide whether it's constitutional or unconstitutional. So in that context, it is definitely part of the official policymakers. Administrative agencies, of course, yes, they're also part of the official policymakers. Often they're invited to shed light on some issues which may aid our great senators and our great congressmen to really come up with better policies in aid of legislation, sabi nga nila. Okay? So administrative agencies. And what about the unofficial? We have the interest groups. And of course, they're party to the interest. Meaning to say, if the seat of balance is deserved, then again, they would really come and then participate in the policymaking process. It may not necessarily be direct, as in if they are not invited to shed light sa mga committee hearings, then again, they would find a way on how they can more or less advance to the government what their interests are. And then political parties, of course, what we're seeing sa mga policies that are being churned out by the government right now are reflections on what they promised during election. Okay? So expect nyo na po yung mga ganyan whenever we see what we call winning candidate, whatever was discussed during the their political party would certainly be proposed and be part of the so-called agenda of the government. Of course, we have communications media, and the way you see, guys, communications media are always party, unofficially, pagdating sa policy making process. In fact, they provide a way by which they can always influence pa rin yung government as to their decisions pagdating po sa mga policies. Okay? And then the last is individual citizens. We cannot help it but to think that a lot of us are experts in our own way. But there are those that are more experts than us. Meaning to say, katulad halimbawa ni Palafox, I think in one of the committee hearings that I attended in the past, he was invited there to shed light, no, or to give information uh, that may aid, no, in terms of creating a better policy pagdating po sa mga building codes kung hindi ako nagkakamali. So anyway, yung expertise na meron po siya is something that talaga namang hindi matatawaran. It's something that we really need, no? Especially if you are creating a policy, no, such as that. So individual citizens. Okay? So don't worry guys, malapit na po tayong matapos. No? These are unofficial policymakers. All right. So how a policy is made in the government. Okay? So sabi ko nga kanina, yung sa process model, then of course, it's a policy making process which James Anderson was actually saying, no? Marami pong typologies, guys. No? Maraming typologies as to how you should look at the policy making process. You have nga yung kay James Anderson, kay Thomas Arday, kina Patten and Sawicki, and all the rest of those, Thomas Bergland, and all the rest of those policy experts, they do have their own. But the ones suggested by James Anderson, okay, are always the ones that are being followed or more or less discussed by professors, no, by faculty members like us. And so in this context, I'd like to discuss itong sinasabi ni James Anderson about how policy is made. So you have problem identification and agenda setting, problem policy formulation, policy adoption, policy implementation, and policy evaluation. These stages are sequential and they are cycles, guys, no? So after you're done with the policy evaluation, perhaps, well, the policy will continue, and then if it bump into something and would probably see that it is no longer applicable, then again, we can come up with a policy that is to replace that policy that is existing. Okay, so it's a cycle lang po naman din. So let's go to the first, yung policy problem, no? Problem identification and agenda setting. So the policy making process begins with the identification of the policy problem by the government from the community. The policy problem, according to James Anderson, is a condition or situation, first, that produces dissatisfaction among the people. And that, in the opinion of the people, the government must necessarily act on this. And so that inconvenience created by a certain problem must not be felt by just an individual. It has to be felt by a lot of people for it to become really a public problem. And take note, guys, it needs to suffice also yung conditions so that it can become an agenda of the government. Meaning requirements, I would say. So if it is not really a problem that is creating a lot of inconveniences to the general public, then certainly the government will not mind it. All right? So that's one. Now, what about agenda setting? This is actually the process of bringing to the attention of the government. No, you see the nating policy issue or policy problem. What do we mean by that? So you need to do something so that it can become an agenda of the government. Okay, so sa discussion po kasi ng public policy, may tinatawag tayong systemic agenda saka institutional agenda. One is, I think, more pressing than the other. Okay, when we say a systemic agenda, then again, anybody or any problem, for as long as it is causing an inconvenience to the general public, can be taken by the government. But you cannot guarantee that the government at all times will immediately take note of that and propose a certain policy. So there might be some other problems that are more pressing, and in that context, the government will readily and immediately take note of them and then propose a certain policy. Okay. Now that is the first stage. The next stage, policy formulation. So this involves developing pertinent and acceptable course of actions, no, for dealing with public concerns. So once the government takes cognizance of the policy agenda, policy proposals or options are immediately drafted by the concerned policymakers or legislators. So syempre, mag-isip ka, ano yung alternatives that you can do in order to resolve, that you can propose in order to resolve that particular policy issue or policy problem. So isip ka, normally apat yan, and then they will decide which one best fits to resolve that particular issue. So once you're done with that, no, then you proceed with the formulation. May providing details, no, doon sa sinasabi natin, giving flesh, doon sa sinasabi natin, napili nating alternative. And that is what we call policy formulation. Next one is policy adoption. After doing so, then again, you need to vote. You need to decide whether or not you're going to proceed with it. And so this policy adoption involves the making of a policy decision in accepting or rejecting a preferred course of action that is developed by the different policymakers in the government. I say that this is also a very a stage that is very much filled with politics, because there are several ways by which there are a lot of ways by which you can do in order to convince the other policymakers to really support what you are proposing. So policy adoption is the development of a solution to the perceived policy problem in the form of a proposed policy or legislation. Then next is policy implementation. Likewise, no, again, this is something that interests a lot of people, including me. So mahiwaga po ito para sa akin how it is being implemented. So this is the process on what happens after a bill becomes a law. Yan po lagi yung connotation na sinasabi nila. So policy implementation is that part of the policy-making process that comes after the final assent is given by the policymakers and is put into a test. When I say assent, this is actually a signature that is being affixed by the president and for it to be implemented. Kasi yun lang naman, after it has passed through the two houses, approved by the president, then it goes with its IRR done, then it goes to the implementing stage. So, ando na po sa policy implementation. You never know what will happen here. So, if you are able to really design a policy and then maganda yung tools, it can be implemented well. Pero everything remains to be seen once you get into the actual implementation. It's not easy to really implement a policy. Ang dami pong considerations. You may not probably be seeing everything at the time when you are crafting your policy, okay, and even before, after getting signed by the president, you will not see it unless, of course, you go into the implementation stage. And then the last one is the policy evaluation. So this last stage is in the policy making process is the policy evaluation, which looks into the extent of the achievement of a given public policy. So normally tinitingnan po natin dyan yung policy output, which are the tangible ones, and then of course yung policy outcome, 3 to 5 years of implementation, then you'll see yung outcome na yun, and then 6 years or more for the policy impact. So this involves the estimation, appraisal, or assessment of a policy, its content, implementation, goal attainment, or other effects. So it puts much premium on the performance of public policy, targeting basically its output and outcome in the process. So dinagdagan lang po natin ng policy impact. All right? So supposedly, every government agency, dapat ginagawa po nila itong policy evaluation. But I do not know if they are really doing this. No? Pero the way I see it, needs to be done. And who else will do it other than the concerned agency, which is actually implementing it? Back then, when we were at the Department of Education in a project, we were often visited by the World Bank and Japan Bank for International Cooperation to see whether or not the project is moving. And it was also at the time when I was working on my policy paper sa NCPAG po. And that proved really helpful, no, yung project po na yun, because we were able to see the actual implementation of the project. And we were able to come up with an evaluation that was used, no, by the Department of Education itself. All right? So the last slide that I'd like to discuss with you is to ask the question, why policymaking matters. Does it matter? Of course. Not to mention that this is my profession, but definitely to everyone, no, public policy matters. So we cannot move from one point to another unless, of course, we have what we call public policy. And this is often what? Also the bone of contention whenever we see government. And when we see in dynamics sa ibaba po, we often base everything sa sinasabi nating policy. The legality of all the policies matter also para po sa ating lahat. Okay? So it matters because through public policies, we see the government united towards a common purpose. The whole way by which we can see the government probably, whether or not it's working, and in unison with some other government agencies, is through the implementation of a policy. It matters as the strength of policymaking is integral to the strength of the government and the country as a whole. Okay? Sabi nga nila, there are two things that the government does, no? Una is to implement a policy, and then pangalawa, to deliver yung services. Okay? Kaya nga po, meron po tayong sinasabi nating education, welfare, health, and everything. These are part and parcel of those services that are to be delivered by the government. And they're always backed up by the so-called public policy. Now, finally, policymaking matters because poor policymaking will lead to widespread negative implications like poor quality services, less benefits delivered, adverse social consequences, and dwindling economic competitiveness. This goes also not just with the national government, but with the local government itself. All right? All the rest about public policy, I will encourage you to just find in your library probably the book, No Understanding Public Policy, Theories, Concepts, and Application, authored by yours truly. Thank you very much, and I'm done with my discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Carmelo Rico Villahasa. Sir, maybe you can you may share your books here. Ano po, yung inyong third books.
Oh, teka.
You have the
Hanapin ko.
slides available. You can share it with us.
Okay, hanapan ko lang po yung...
Para naman makita po ng ating community that you have these available books already. And
Okay. Sige po. I hope you're seeing this, guys.
okay, ano na muna natin?
Nasa Shopee. Sorry po ha. Just so you can see it, no? Ayaw. Alright, anyway, ito lang po yung book, no? Na sinasabi po natin ni Ma'am Jopi.
It's ayan na. Sir, with the sharing, it's already yours, yung platform. You can share it.
Ayan, okay.
Okay.
There you are.
Para makita po nilang lahat.
Oh, hindi ko makaroon kung na-save ko yung connector.
We are...
Ito, natutuwa lang po ako dito kasi lagi ko pong binabanggit ang PUP dito, other than the other institutions where I am working right now. So, yon. Anyway, sige po. I think ito naman po ay makikita nila pagka search po nila sa internet. Just some few words pa rin po about this, no? Sabi ni Pres kanina, sabi nga ni Ma'am Jopi din, no? Itong platform na to is one way of seeing, no? Balik-tanaw, sabi nga natin, no? Doon sa ating mga produkto. And just to tell everyone, normally, whenever we are invited, no, for a talk, no, sa mga government agencies po, I'm proud to say that that I'm from PUP. Hindi po nawawala yun. Hindi po nawawala yun. Ako man po ay nasa ibang institution right now, hindi ko na po babanggitin, no? Yun po ay dahil lamang, no, doon sa sinasabi natin, kailangan nating ipamahagi yung kaalaman na natutunan natin mula sa ating sintang paaralan. Kapag makikita ko po ang ating logo, makikita ko po ang pangalan ng PUP, tayo po ay kinikilabutan. At ito pong platform na to ay isang malaking bagay para po sa katulad ko na hindi naman po nakakarating na ulit ng PUP. The last time I checked, pumupunta pa po kami sa Popeye dati dyan eh. Saka doon sa may mga kainan doon. Nung makita ko, ay iba na po yata yung nandun, no? At marami pa pong iba, no? Yung chapel, ganun pa rin naman, no? Yung field, no? Marami nang nabago, no? At pag pumapasok po ako, yung guard ay napakahigpit po. Minsan hindi po ako basta-basta pinapapasok. Pero okay lang po yun kasi part ng security po natin. At balita ko po may kinoconstruct po yatang bagong building po sa ating sintang paaralan. Marami pong istorya, no? Diyan po sa 6th floor na yan, sa North Wing, kung di po ako nagkakamali, Ma'am Jopi, ano po? Doon po sa may dome ay diyan po kami bumabato ng silya nung kapanahunan po ng Helior Crisostomo na administrasyon. Okay? Marami pong istorya. Pero maraming salamat po. Maraming salamat po. Ma'am Jopi, I am turning over to you yung one.
Sir, this is an opportunity also to hear your stories because we have also our alumni testimonial. So, your stories are really, alam niyo po yun, kung nakakakilabot, parang nakaka-ano rin po eh. It's so, yung overwhelming, the feeling na, oh, I'm back even online lang po. I'm still able to interact with the community. And through the ARTDO Alumni Relations and Career Development Office, we would like to thank you in behalf of our director, Engineer Florinda H. Oquindo. Thank you very much, sir. Kasi this is really substantial. Lahat po na sinabi ninyo are the basic foundations of public policy and I hope sa ating pong mga mag-aaral, makatulong po sa kanila to. Para lalo na yung mga students din who is watching yung ating pong mga Facebook accounts. PUP Facebook accounts, nagse-search po yan yung mga bata eh. So, hindi pa man sila estudyante ng PUP, parang pag narinig nila tong webinar na to, oops, now I know what is public administration course. Parang dati kasi always left behind. Gusto engineering, accountancy. Sorry po but kung mabibigyan natin ng buhay ang every program and every courses through our alumni, thank you very much po for your participation. And of course, yung kung ating mga alumni naman na graduate, it's a refresher course for them, no? Na bumabalik po sa kanila na, ay oo, alam ko to, favorite subject ko to. While listening with you, sir, natutuwa nga ako parang biglang nag-pop up yung, ay gusto ko yung Neo Gramscianism na principle. Yung bigla na lang, ano yung favorite topic mo? Parang mabubuhay ka na lang kung ano yung, parang dito yung yung spirit to very alive. So, napakaganda po na bisitahin kami, bumalik muli ang mga alumni sa PUP, lalo na ang mga tulad po ng ating kasama ngayon. Of course, Dr. Carmelo Rico Biasa. Sir, kahit nasa ibang institution kayo, alam ko mahal na mahal ninyo ang PUP. Kulang lang sa oras, sir, no? Yung physically mag-a-attend tayo. So, ito pong virtual time na binigay niyo po sa amin. Maraming salamat po from the bottom of our heart. You're always welcome. Balik po kayo sa PUP, sama po kayo sa amin. Hindi na po tayo magbabato ng silya.
Salamat po, salamat po.
So, sir, we will be awarding your certificate of appreciation. So, let me read the citation. The certificate of appreciation is hereby given to Professor Dr. Carmelo Rico S. Biasa in grateful acknowledgement of his engagement and insightful academic contribution as resource speaker for imparting his knowledge and expertise as notable alumni in the Baliksintang Paaralan, the PUP Alumni Webinar Series with the title Understanding Public Policy, Theories and Applications, held on October 9, 2024 via Zoom and Facebook Live. Given this October 9, 2024, the Polytechnic University of the Philippines, Santa Mesa, Manila, signed Engineer Florinda H. Aquino, the Director of ARTO, and Tomas Otestor, Vice President for Student Affairs and Services. Sir, thank you very much. Please accept our token of appreciation.
Thank you po. Thank you.
Maraming salamat po sa inyo, sir, sa pagpapaunlak po namin sa inyo. Pagpapaunlak po ninyo sa amin. Kahit po, in spite of your busy time, thank you very much. And lastly, we would like to invite everyone, paki-coach na lang po kami, technical, for your screenshot. Kasi minsan, mabilis po magbilang ang aming technical. Ayan. So, by the way, since kami naman po ay live on stream on Facebook, we are still, after this, we are still inviting other alumni na makapag to listen and watch, of course, and evaluate, help us evaluate. Okay, page 1. Screenshot na po. May lang po kayo for page 1. And we will be sending your certificate through your email. So please answer po yung ating pong evaluation form. Second page na po. Thank you po sa ating mga participants from the different program, be it entrepreneur. Last page po. Screenshot again. Smile lang po tayo sa ating pong Open University participants sa College of Public Administration. Alright? Tapos na daw po ang ating pag-screenshot. So, maraming salamat po sa inyo. Last po, i-post po natin ang ating evaluation link. At ipopost na rin po ito sa Facebook Live at sa ating pong chat box. Yan. Sa chat box na siya. at Facebook Live. So available po siya any time of the day. You can still answer the evaluation. So, ayan po. Maraming salamat po sa ating
Thank
mga
you.
participate today. And of course, sir, thank you, Brad. Thank you
Alright.
very much.
Thank you, Ma'am Joppy. Apo, salamat po.